they were much better at solving problems and tasks, and they were physically healthier, socially more active, and they seemed to live longer than the mice that were in the lab cages. And he called this an environmental enrichment. And then this enrichment, this study goes on further in the 1960s by a lady that's very important to me, a scientist called Diamond. And she takes this research and she does something where she has three environments. One, the shiny lab cage with the bright lights. Then a lab cage that has a running wheel, like a typical one that you see. And then more of an enriched environment, something like this. So she has the three groups of mice, and after 30 days, only 30 days, she dissects the brains of the mice. What does she discover? This is only after 30 days. The mice that were in the enriched environments, or I should say the mice that were in the base one, with just the running wheel, nothing happens to the neurons and the synapses in their brains pre and post. But the mice that are in the enriched environments, the synapses grow compared to the baseline. They grow at a rate of 25% more in just the span of 30 days. The synapses actually grow and stretch and connect in just 30 days, and the cortex thickens in the top of the brain, which is quite remarkable, and it's very important for a lot of cognitive things. But what about the mice that are in the impoverished environments, the lab cages? Dissects the brains, and she finds that, in fact, the synapses begin to wither and shrivel the same way that a plant does without light or nourishment or water. And this is just after the span of 30 days. And in fact, environmental enrichment is now used, in fact, to treat all Alzheimer's, in certainly the aging mind, and a variety of other neural issues. And so this idea that the research is showing that impoverished environments like the lab cages, in fact, they impair cognitive development and they speed up cognitive decline, aging, and the growth of dementia because of the environments that we choose to inhabit or create. The question is it the same in people? Is this just something in mice and animals? And there's something called the Angola 3, a very famous case in the United States. This is three people that are in solitary confinement for somewhere between 10, 15, and just shy of 30 years. And they had to take this to the Supreme Court to prove that it is cruel and unusual punishment. Putting people in solitary confinement for somewhere between 10 and 30 years, you need to prove that this is terrible treatment to our fellow humans. Robert King is in solitary confinement again, just shy of 30 years, inside in a room without light or a window or a view for all but 1 hour a day. It goes to the Supreme Court, and they prove that, in fact, it damages the hippocampus. The hippocampus, as you know, that's at the bottom of the brain. It's very important for emotional regulation, spatial orientation, memory. And in fact, he just simply loses the ability to recognize other faces because of the space that he within. And his brain, again, begins to wither the same way that a plant does without water or nourishment. But let's move on to the positive side of environmental enrichment and this idea that every space that you walk in, you have cognitive, pre-conscious, precognitive, subconscious, emotional reactions that changes your physiology and your psychology. And these have been shown to do a whole variety of things. Reduce your cortisol levels, as you know, that has a relationship to stress, increase your serotonin levels, which are the wellness neurotransmitter, reduce blood pressure, heart rate, increase heart rate variability, enhance your immune system. as well as we've heard, in enhanced memory, learning, social interaction, simply as a result of the environmental conditions. And these things aren't really new. They've been studied since the 1970s. They've been around for a good 50 years, and this is a number of the different areas of studies. I get into them in a lot more detail in my book. I just want to touch on this idea of place attachment theory, which effectively says that we form emotional relationships with our surroundings. And the way that we form our person-to-place relationships, our person-to-place relationships to our surroundings, in fact, the meaningful ones are very similar to the way that you and I form meaningful person-to-person relationships. So in fact, the way that you form the meaningful person-to-person relationships is in fact the same way that your mind is forming the relationships with the things around you. And they're based on a couple things which are tied to this idea of a sense of coherence. And a sense of coherence is buttressed by the ideas of comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. And they come out of the roots of the idea of salutogenesis, spaces that offer generosity and authenticity. Again, spaces that offer more and communicate a higher purpose, and places that are real and rooted. And the first one is just a little school environment. I mean, this is the existing campus. I don't know if that's like a lot of the schools that you went to that are surrounded by parking lots. And you look at this from a sense of coherence. Where's the front door? How do you get into this building? Does it communicate it? Not so much. So we added this building out front, and we added a little garden in the foreground to it. So you leave the parking ground, you pass through a garden, you then enter a covered canopy outside, you move into the building. Beyond that, it then opens up to another courtyard and then connects through into the existing building. And so you can see the progression from the right, moving through the garden. So that's sensory experience. A covered canopy that protects you from the weather, generosity. You then move inside to this building that then the roof slopes open and open its view to the garden beyond that, and then the existing building beyond that. So the existing and then the current, the new design. Notice the pathway isn't straight, so that as you move, your view is constantly changing. The plants were chosen very specifically, so the sensory experience, both visual and scent, changes over time throughout the seasons. You can see the covered canopy that that protects you. When you move inside, the entrance at the far left, the roof is just lifted above the walls. It opens up to the right. You can see the mix of these fractal patterns, the curve and the triangles, this positive ambiguity, and this sense of discovery as a result of it. Natural materials, natural light, again, the fractal patterns, the triangles, the curve your eye follows around, the triangle your eye stops, this sort of idea of consonance and distance from music reflected in architecture, and a space that just has the ability to be moody and capture the changing light in seasons and times of days as a result of the surroundings. This idea of variety and vitality, and a sense of discovery and curiosity. Another little school project. The exterior is this extraskeletal mass timber structure, very little middle school building. But you can begin to see within it the mix of these curves and triangular shapes on the building. The structure supports the roof. Again, it's a mass timber structure on the outside. But the question is, why are these things added? Why are they there? Are they just an architectural folly? It's not about really what they do on the outside, but it is what they do on the inside. When we think of curiosity and discovery, that when you're on the inside, of creating this space that is almost like a tree house that captures the changing light and changing mood to create an environment that's sensory rich for little guys that are just trying to learn, and for the space to stimulate and exercise your mind, and that you're aware of your surroundings just by the changing light and the environment of which it has to offer. At a larger scale, something that's about 100,000 square meters or 1 million square feet, a very, very large medical center that uses the same ideas. The main circulation area is this gently curved space. And the idea is that when you're in it, like that curved pathway coming up to the building, your mind uses 20% of the energy of your body. Straight corridor, it wants to sum up what's happening very quickly. A jagged corridor, you're not sure if you want to go down it because it might be a little threatening, but the gentle curve slowly leads you further and you want to discover what's in front of you. Look at the stair, the same principles. It's slightly curved because as you move up it, it's changing your perceptive and the sensory diet that the space is feeding you as you move through it. So applying this at the very large scale or that gently curved little first space that we looked at. This idea of hope and natural environments. One's hope is very different than optimism. Look at Snyder's hope theory, very important for me. It's very similar to salutogenesis, this idea of a sense of coherence.
Do you use art much in your projects? Where does it come in the process of design? How can I help myself get more, use my art, which I believe is channeled from nature, to support the kind of work like you're doing?
We incorporate in a lot of ways. I mean, in simple ways. If you look at some of the patterns, we collaborated with somebody for those leaves. They're all recycled glass, and the idea of fundamentally integrating the art into the building, I think, is important for us on a variety of different ways. There's a book you may or may not have seen, which I would recommend, Susan Magsman, who's her book, Your Brain on
Art.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
It's really a good resource. I was in Washington, D.C. yesterday with some of the people that are very much involved in Susan's lab. But I think the idea of incorporating the art, but also the ability of art making as it relates to mind health, the act, is very, very important. I think the work of Richard Taylor, I don't know if you know him, he's a professor from Seattle who looks at mid-range fractal patterns, very influential for me. He did a study of mid-range fractal patterns in nature that, if the patterns in nature are very simple, they become boring. If they're very complex, like a thicket, they're too complex and we don't enjoy it. That mid-range is very important. He did you may have seen it, that study on Jackson Pollock paintings. And, why do people spend
Hours.
tens of millions of dollars on his work? Because he discovered that they're right in the mid-range fractal complexity that really, really draws you in. And so I think it's a very interesting thing to look at if you're making art and paintings. And I think this positive ambiguity where it's like that Rubens vase. If we look at a black vase on a white background, we see two faces, or we see the vase, and your mind dances back and forth. It's really interesting. There's another guy, I don't know if you read the book, I'd highly recommend it, Eric Kandel. He's a Nobel Prize-winning neuroscientist who's written the book, The Age of Insight, Vienna in the 1900s. Probably one of the most important books that I've read on really looking at the intersection of Sigmund Freud, Gustav Klimt, Vienna at the period that was mixing together all of these ideas together. I think it's probably one of the most important books I've read, or the ones that have influenced me. I hope that's of help.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this positive ambiguity comes up all the time when people see my work, because right away they know it's a single image from nature, and they start querying, what is it? What am I seeing? And I encourage them also to, what are you feeling? Because so much of that is what's transcribed, coming through the art.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the references.
Ali, nice to see you.
Nice to see you
in an almost person, or at least moving instead of a still. How are you?
Well, great to see you too, and thank you for such a great presentation, Tye. I think I mostly resonate with your idea of architecture and architectural space not being neutral. And Robert Irwin, one of the abstract expressionists writes about calculus in art. And he says every move you make on the canvas has something to contribute, either a positive or a negative sort of impact. And that is true of architecture, of course, but in a very complex way, as you are discussing here also. And I am sort of now working on a series of research and work that is dealing with this idea of impact of architecture on human and well-being through mainly focusing on light and its impact on the brain's regulation of circadian rhythms, which is then relating to all sorts of ideas that you are presenting, including mood, including stress, including sleep, including cognitive performance.